Hello and welcome to our virtual broadcast of Bridging Operations to the Future, Incorporating Existing Processes into WebEOC, presented by Kip Holdridge. As you have learned by now, Kip is an emergency management professional from the DOE HQ Consolidated Emergency Operations Center with 15 years of experience in emergency communications, disaster response, community recovery, and continuity of operations. Kip has also supported FEMA, DoD, USDA, HUD, and the White House Military Office through countless exercises and real-world events. If you have a question, don't forget to use our chat to the right. Enter your questions, and I'll be sure to relay them to Kip during the Q&A after his presentation. Kip, take it away.
Welcome, everyone, to today's session entitled Bridging Operations to the Future, Incorporating Existing Processes into WebEOC. My name is Kip Holdridge, and I'm a Policies and Procedures Analyst in the DOE NNSA Headquarters Consolidated Emergency Operations Center. I'll be sharing with you the outcomes and lessons learned from a recent campaign to modernize and increase our use of WebEOC in the Headquarters EOC. This is our agenda for today's session. We will walk through where we started from, what we did, and where we are today. We will finish up by talking about our vision for the future and lessons learned from our experience in this endeavor. WebEOC is a commercial software package designed for incident management. Its use is widespread throughout the emergency management community, and I'm sure many of you are at least somewhat familiar with WebEOC. However, WebEOC is just one of many options available in the marketplace that do basically the same thing. Although this presentation centers around our experience with WebEOC, the approaches and lessons learned can be applied to any similar product. Version 8 of WebEOC included major updates to the user interface and standard design of WebEOC boards. Unfortunately, I do not have any screenshots of a version 7 era system, but those of you that use the system can attest to how major of a change to the user interface was implemented. This really helped modernize the software and allow it to take advantage of modern web design languages and approaches. One side effect of this major UI upgrade is that it made older boards look antiquated and really show their age. The Headquarters WebEOC instance serves two primary audiences, which are the Watch Office and the Unified Coordination Structure General Staff, or the personnel that staff the EOC during activations. There are additional users of the system across Headquarters and the Emergency Management Enterprise, but these two audiences account for the majority of the system's use. So now let's jump into the beginning. It was a long time ago in early 2018. Although we had upgraded our WebEOC server from version 7 to version 8, and were enjoying the benefits of the new user interface, we were still primarily using old WebEOC 7 era boards that were showing their age. Further, the two main audiences for our service were making minimal use of the system and its capabilities. The Watch Office basically used only two boards, their operations log and a senior leadership tracker. The UCS general staff wasn't doing much more, using the activity log and significant events log, along with an RFI tracker, battle rhythm, and a handful of other boards that were seldom used. In fact, one of our most significant issues is that users would create ad hoc processes rather than use the tools available to them. This would often take the form of opening a blank Excel file to create an RFI tracker from scratch for each incident, rather than just using the RFI tracker within WebEOC. Basically, what we found is that the old boards had not kept pace with operations and were no longer reflected how business was being conducted. Here we see some examples of the older boards being used circa 2018, including the Watch Office's operations log and senior leadership locator, as well as an RFI tracker and battle rhythm. Notice that none of these boards share a common look or feel. So what did we do about the situation? Well, in mid-2018, we secured a support services contract with Givari, the developer of WebEOC. This contract supported 2 part-time board developers to help us achieve our vision. As it happened to turn out, our developers were quite familiar with DOE operations, one having supported the Savannah River site before, and the other originally coming from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency and intimately familiar with Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Security Complex. We started by examining our current manual processes for opportunities to transition the process into a WebEOC board. For those of you that attended the presentation on the CEOC Daily Operational Brief, you know that there are slides in the briefing that track DOE and NNSA asset deployments, as well as the operational status of labs, plants, and sites across the complex. This was originally achieved through manual manipulation of maps on PowerPoint slides, but has since been transitioned to WebEOC boards that show the data displayed on a map in real time. We also updated our existing boards with an eye towards a cohesive look and design across all boards. We also incorporated GIS capabilities, such as adding geotags to the senior leadership location tracking information that we already maintained, so that their locations could easily be displayed on a map. We also built underlying processes into our boards, such as the new RFI tracker that is underpinned by a process that tracks the status of an RFI throughout its lifecycle, from initial receipt through the various stages to completion. On this slide, we see some of the new boards. You will see that geotagging location information is now a centerpiece of several boards, and that all boards now share a similar design and feel. One of our more ambitious updates was to the Watch Office's operations log. Rather than just refresh the design and feel, we incorporated a significant amount of process into the board. Now, when a watch officer creates a new entry, drop-down menus allow the event to be categorized by standing critical information requirements, and in some cases, sub-requirements. For example, an event could be categorized as an operational emergency, and then by the classification of the operational emergency. The categorization of the event then drives the system to return a list of required and recommended checklists that must be completed for the event. The watch officer has the latitude to select additional checklists as warranted, including from those that the system had not originally recommended. Once the watch officer selects the applicable checklists, they can then complete them electronically within WebEOC. The final log entry tracks the number of pending, open, and completed checklists. This allows the single log entry to be a comprehensive record of the event, including the completed checklists executed by the watch. Another significant effort was increasing our use of the Maps add-on and GIS capabilities. We now have predefined a number of maps within WebEOC that include the relevant GIS REST services for information such as weather data, as well as data overlays from our own WebEOC boards. For example, in the upper right, you will see how senior leadership location data can be compared against DOE and NNSA sites. In this example, the president is traveling to North Carolina and will not be near a DOE or NNSA site. In the lower right is a pre-built map for tracking tropical storm activity in the Atlantic Basin. In addition to storm track data, radar returns, and lightning strike density, you will notice that the DOE and NNSA sites are plotted as well. This allows for analysis on potential impacts from a storm on DOE and NNSA missions and operations. And in the lower left, you see an example from tracking a recent Super Bowl, with the stadium and the venue for the Super Bowl experience overlaid on a satellite image of downtown Atlanta. All of this brings us to where we are today. We have implemented our new boards in our production environment and continue to make tweaks and improvements based on user feedback. Because we were rolling out the new boards as COVID-19 emerged, our training to date has been limited. We typically conduct our WebEOC training in a classroom environment so that participants can be logged into the system and follow along. But we have had success shifting to a webinar format. The main disadvantage is losing the interactive nature of classroom-based training, so we have compensated by instituting mini exercises that are conducted via webinar. Participants take turns sharing their screen and responding to injects within the system. Although not a full replacement for classroom-based training, these mini exercises give participants the opportunity to practice using the system while responding to realistic prompts. We still have two distinct environments within our WebEOC system, one for the Watch Office and another for the UCS general staff. However, we have created synergies between these two environments by linking the data available within them, and in some cases, sharing the same boards. Although each audience has their own unique needs and requirements for the system, the goal is a common operating picture that facilitates general staff operations by providing them with all of the data from the Watch Office's early involvement in the incident, rather than the general staff walking into the room cold and having to reconstruct the early movements of an incident. And now, where we are going. We have a vision for an enterprise-level emergency management information sharing system. In this vision, we would utilize WebEOC to enhance incident information sharing and facilitate a true department-level common operating picture. Sites would have their own sandbox within the system to manage their local operations, feeding pertinent information up to the headquarters EOC. Sites with their own WebEOC servers would be able to connect and share information through Web Fusion or the new Javari Exchange. And sites with their own systems would be able to connect and share information through open application programming interfaces. I hope that this vision is exciting to you as emergency managers, and know that many of you have been proposing a similar approach for several years. But getting there from here involves solving some challenges, including technical issues regarding hosting of the system. Although our headquarters WebEOC instance is secure, that security does not allow for the connections necessary to realize this vision, which is why we are looking at options for hosting WebEOC that will allow for this vision and still provide the necessary security. As with all major projects, the timeline for this vision is uncertain. There are many variables, including designing the right system architecture and the availability of funding. But if this vision excites you the same way it excites us, we would like to hear from you. The broader coalition of interested sites and the more weight behind the vision, the faster it will come to fruition. If you are interested in undertaking a similar update at your site, whether you use WebEOC or some other system, here are some of our lessons learned and best practices. The first is to have a vision from the beginning. One of the most valuable aspects of a system like WebEOC is the ability to have your boards work together. One of our primary goals was to ensure that the same piece of data never had to be entered into the system more than once. By mapping relationships between boards, we were able to develop boards that pull data from other boards and help us reach our goal of eliminating redundant data entry. Because we knew from the start that certain boards would be highly interrelated, the back-end design of the boards ended up being different than if each board had been developed on its own. You will also want to define your requirements. In our WebEOC instance, we think in terms of audiences. We have helped a number of audiences of the system build new boards and increase their use of the system, in addition to our two primary audiences. But without exception, the audiences that define their own requirements have had superior results over those that just took a, hey, give me what you got approach. Perhaps most importantly, if you have processes that already work, don't try to reinvent the wheel just to adopt a piece of software like WebEOC. Software should support your processes, not dictate them. To that end, our most successful boards have been those which we built to facilitate a process that was already in place. Since WebEOC boards are essentially tables, it is easy to transition existing boards and trackers into WebEOC boards. A great advantage to this approach is that since your personnel are already familiar with the process, it reduces the training requirements later on. Rather than teaching a completely new process, you only have to teach a new way to conduct a familiar process using a new tool. We've talked several times during the presentation about building process into your boards. This will elevate them from a static tool to record actions to a facilitator of incident management. As an example, you can see here the process diagram that we made before designing our new RFI tracker. One last best practice is to use what is called a spiral development approach. Instead of holding on to your boards and trying to perfect them, which can become an endless cycle, embrace the cycle by releasing your boards for use once they are functional. This is because your best ideas and feedback will come from your users. By getting a board out and into use, the feedback that is generated will help make the board 10 times better than it ever would have been otherwise. This means, though, that board development will become a never-ending process of continuous improvement. This doesn't mean, however, that there is no room for fluctuations in resource availability. You may not have the resources to implement all of the feedback you receive from your users, but you can take care of the low-hanging fruit and keep a list of the other items for a later date when resources are available. In fact, having that list of items awaiting action can be the ammunition you need to justify the additional resources needed to make them happen. I would like to thank everyone for joining me today to talk about our experience in updating our WebEOC boards. I would love to hear any thoughts you have and answer any questions you have at this time.
Thanks for your presentation, Kip. And I noticed you had some droid support behind you. So for those of you doing your scavenger hunt forms, now's your chance. I'll open it up to some questions. I've got one right here. First one is, my site does not have the resources for a dedicated WebEOC developer. How can we update our existing boards without dedicated support?
All right, so this is a very good question, and one that we get quite a bit. And kind of the way that we approach the problem here at headquarters is just kind of asked around to see what kind of skill sets the existing staff already had. One of the things that we found is, WebEOC essentially, when you're creating these boards, you're just writing web pages. So anyone with HTML knowledge and a little bit of JavaScript is more than capable of creating a WebEOC board. And that's kind of how I fell into place using, kind of being the administrator of the headquarters WebEOC server. Because about 20 years ago, when I was going through college, I created websites, as a side gig to earn some extra money, and took all of that knowledge from 20 years ago and dusted it off and relearned a little bit. And that's how I fell into creating WebEOC boards myself. One of the other options would be to see what other support is available within your site. So chances are, particularly at the larger sites, there's a team of folks already that do web development and JavaScript. And it could be possible, if you check with those folks, that you might be able to get some of their hours to do, build a couple of boards for you, rather than letting a whole new contract to try to get some dedicated support. So that would be my recommendation, is to seek out what's already available to you. Perhaps someone within your team already has those skills, or someone within your lab or your site has those skills, and you can borrow some of their time.
Oh yes, work smarter, not harder. The next question I have is, my site has WebEOC, but we don't use it. I would like to update what we have and start using it again. Where do I start?
So I think one of the best places to start, and the folks that I've worked with to do this very same thing, the ones that have had the most success, we started by looking at what their current process is. We didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what was already in WebEOC, because if they weren't using it, it's not what they were doing. So we would start from where they were. And in most cases, they would have some kind of templates already. They would have, an Excel file that was essentially a process tracker. And they would have a couple of Word documents, for a situation report outline. And we would take those existing templates and just build those into WebEOC boards. They were essentially just electronic versions of those existing templates. And then that way, we were implementing the process that they were already using. And as I mentioned during the presentation, the real advantage to that is we're not reinventing the wheel. They've already implemented a lot of these processes, done a lot of effort in terms of training. So that way you don't have to completely retrain all of your folks on a completely new process. It's just the small tweaks of, okay, rather than pulling up an Excel file to do this tracking, now we're going to use this board in WebEOC that looks very similar to do the exact same thing. So in my
Great.
experience, those have been the ones that have been the most successful, is just start with where you are now and build out from there.
Okay. And I guess David Stuhan is chiming in. Imagine that. One great thing about WebEOC, you can share boards among sites and easily import them. Thank you, Mr. Stuhan. We also refer to him as Mr. Awesome, our steering committee chair. The last question I have, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's a great point. We've done that ourselves. We've shared boards actually with other agencies as well, not just within sites. And that's one of the beauties of WebEOC is you can export a board as an entire package and share it with someone else. And when you bring that into your own instance, of course, you'll need to do a little bit of tweaking because it's designed for someone else, but the bulk of the work is already there for you. So that's a great avenue, is to work off of work that someone else has already started.
Yeah, tell me about it. One last question. My site doesn't have WebEOC. With your enterprise vision, would my site be able to use HQ WebEOC?
So essentially, yes, that's what we're looking at doing, is taking our existing server and rehoming it, probably in some sort of cloud-based solution, so that it's accessible and open to everyone. Because right now, with all the security features on that server, it's not open to everyone. And what that will allow us to do is then essentially offer that service to sites, particularly those that don't already have a server of their own, particularly those smaller sites. Because we're noticing a trend with EA recommendations that they're starting to recommend all the sites, even the smaller ones, to get some sort of information management system, and that can be a pretty cost prohibitive thing to do. So we're looking at leveraging that on an enterprise level to provide that service, particularly for those smaller sites that don't have anything right now. But we're also doing it in a way that we're going to preserve what's already there for some of the bigger sites. If they already have WebEOC, we're not going to kick them out of what they have. There's ways to link WebEOC servers together. And for the sites that use other systems, there's still ways to link the servers together. We're not saying you have to give up whatever system that you currently use. We just want to use technology to make those systems interact and share the data back and forth. Officially, we're system agnostic. What we really care about is the data and sharing the data back and forth. And so that's the goal of our enterprise vision.
All right. System agnostic. It's a new term for today. Thank you very much. And Kip, thank you for your time and your informative presentation. We're at the end of our session, so if you would, please complete the survey by clicking on the survey icon just below the description in the virtual meeting app in order to receive credit for attending this session. Again, don't forget to update your scavenger hunt form. And the next session we'll be having is challenges in implementing the ad hoc mass communication system at LANL. Select it from the schedule on the left, or you're always welcome to join another channel to watch an SBX demonstration, attend a workshop, or participate in a user group. Thanks so much, and we'll see you later.